The 2024 NFL Draft is in the books. Our favorite classes from the entire 7 rounds, 257 picks. Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers and we love everyone who is subscribed up. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, our favorite draft classes, and I know there's a lot of them, and I think some teams did some really good work and maybe some franchise-changing moments over the course of Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with the 3-day NFL draft that was, but some bad news overnight and into the morning today as we sit here. And Tank Dell was involved in a shooting. He was shot. You just saw the latest details and informed me of what those were. And luckily, there's some good news here for Tank Dell. But man, when you hear something like that, it's like, wow, that's scary.
Yeah, it sounds like a 16-year-old boy, young man, whatever, shot 10 different people outside a nightclub or at a nightclub or whatever, like you said, into the morning, late night. And the last I saw, and pull back the curtain, we're recording this a little early, wanted to get this to you as our draft reaction show, that he was released from the hospital with minor injuries. So hopefully that's all it is. I mean, maybe he was just scraped. I don't know the details other than that, but I thought we should bring it up. And I guess it's bad news, but it's could have been a lot worse, obviously,
Yeah, absolutely. Could have been a heck of a lot worse. So fantastic news there that he's doing okay out of the hospital and those types of things. And, obviously it's just a terrible situation. And you shake your head. What are we doing?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Draft classes. Tank Dell gets comped multiple times in this draft class. Tank Dell's like the new comp for any skinny, undersized, underweight wide receiver because he was hit last year for the Houston Texans, right? And one of those teams was the Kansas City Chiefs. And I love what the Kansas City Chiefs did. They moved up twice.
They're on my list too. Yeah.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah. We don't have all the same ones.
Here. I'm sure there's going to be some crossover in our lists. I love what the Kansas City Chiefs did here because they got someone who could be insanely dangerous in their offense in the first round. And they didn't have to go super far, but they went up a little bit to secure this player, to jump in front of some teams. I think my 49ers might have been real interested at pick 31 in Xavier Worthy. Maybe the Buffalo Bills would have gone there, but they had a couple of wide receivers that they liked and were willing to move down a little bit. And that's who they moved up with to go to 28 in front of the Dallas Cowboys that maybe were interested in someone with 4.21 speed and drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round. So, and the scariest place maybe for Worthy to land was with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, right? So I love that move to go be proactive. Brett Veach doing his thing, going up and getting his guy. And then they did it again in the second round. They moved up just one spot, but with the 49ers from 64 to 63 to get Kingsley Suamataia. And those were those two big needs. And maybe some boom or bust potential here, but the boom is really high with both of those prospects. They might have a bookend offensive tackle, left or right tackle by year 2 or 3 of Suamataia's career. And they might have a potential star difference-making player for their offense and one of the fastest players in the NFL, and maybe someone that could replace some of what Tyreek used to do. He's different than Tyreek, but he's got that crazy speed that might make teams play a little bit different when you have a quarterback that can put it out there wherever he needs to a guy with 4.21 speed. So I really liked what the Kansas City Chiefs did there, maneuvering and potentially hitting their two biggest needs with guys that could be big for them. Now, obviously, they have to do the work and coach those guys up, and they have to complete the job and make sure they're the boom and not the bust with those two players.
Yeah, they were on my list as well. And A lot of it's because those top two picks are such high ceiling players, and this is a good organization with a good quarterback and a good coaching staff, and they've gotten the most out of people. So it's great landing spots for a receiver and a tackle. I know you weren't comparing them directly to Tyreek Hill. I don't think it's even close to a one-to-one replacement, but I love what you said of he can do some of the things that Hill did, and you mix that with Marquise Brown. That's massive speed. But they were on my list for those two reasons, as much as Jaden Hicks was one of my favorite safeties. I looked quite a bit at Hunter Norzad and thought he might be a starting center in this league. And Jared Wiley fall in here. Like I joked leading up to the draft that the Chiefs should trade 3 first-round picks for Brock Bowers. But Wiley is 6'6", former quarterback, really athletic. We'll probably not hear anything from him, but next year you might be wishing he's on your fantasy team.
Fantastic job by Brett Veach and Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's a reason they're a really good football team. And you're not supposed to be able to get that potential much firepower. That's why they do the draft the way they do. And the team that wins the Super Bowl drafts last in the first round. And they didn't stand for it. And they didn't draft last in either of the first 2 rounds and went and got some potential big time pieces. So it'll be exciting to see how that turns out for them. Who's next up for you in one of your favorite drafts in 2024?
I want to go with the Eagles. Kellen Moore's now the offensive coordinator there. I think he looks at Will Shipley and says maybe he can do some Tony Pollard things. 2 of my favorite values in this entire draft are Aeneas Smith, the wide receiver in the 5th round, and Big Johnny Wilson in the 6th, and they couldn't be any more different. You take Trotter and put him back to Daddy's team. Okay, I'm cool with that. Linebackers is not a strength of that organization right now. But, of course, you have to address the top 2 corners. I mean, these were 2 of my top 3 corners. I was a little shocked that Jean fell to the 2nd round, but so be it. And I think both of them fit quite well in this Fangio defense. Corners don't grow on trees. And we talked about this Friday after day 1. A lot of these playoff-type teams had their pick of the litter at the corner position. That's just rare. And then the Eagles doubled down.
Yeah, and we mentioned after round 1 that it was silly that the Eagles were able to sit there at 22 and get Quinyon Mitchell. People had mocked the Eagles trading up to pick number 8 all the way to the top 10 to get the same player in Quinyon Mitchell. They get the best corner in the draft just sitting there at 22, and then they maneuver their way around. And most of their picks were traded at some point in this draft. Only that 1st rounder and one of their 5th rounders was not traded.
Did they have the most trades in draft history? Did I read that somewhere? They traded out like 8,000 times and now have a ton of next year picks.
Yeah, and they drafted a ton of guys in this class too.
Yeah.
The maneuver to go get Cooper DeJean. So look, Vic Fangio showed up in town and said, this is not going to happen with this secondary. We're going to address this. And I think Cooper DeJean falling to round 2 tells us most teams did think that he was more safety than corner potentially. So and I haven't heard yet if they've said exactly what they think his role is going to be, but I imagine it's more inside, or at least part-time inside, versus being a true outside corner. Unlike Quinyon Mitchell, is like he's an outside dude. So interesting class there, and they really upgrade their secondary. And then take some big swings with Jalix Hunt at the end of the 3rd round, edge rusher from Houston Christian, and he can just sit and maybe become something and put on some weight for a year or 2, play some special teams. They got Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the 5th. You mentioned Williams, Will Shipley in the 4th. Johnny Wilson's just a really interesting weapon for that offense. And then Dylan McMahon. Dylan McMahon, a guard out of NC State, he worked out really good, and he put up crazy combine numbers as an interior offensive lineman. And they did just have a guy who retired that was a 6th round pick. He put up crazy combine numbers and developed.
Beef Jurgens too,
really
same mold,
Yeah, so there you go, Dylan McMahon in the 6th round. Really good draft class for them, and it's just like you shake your head how he's good at this.
Yeah, I wanted to double check because they made 9 picks, and they also have the Dolphins 3rd next year, the Texans 5th next year as well as another 7th. So they did acquire a bunch of stuff for tomorrow too.
Lots more really good draft classes that I'm excited to see here play on the field for these teams in 2024 and beyond from the 2024 NFL Draft next. This episode is brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, and it's playoff time, NBA and NHL. It's Baseball season, full swing Major League Baseball bets to be had at FanDuel. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single one of those games. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks and those NFL season futures as well. All on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the place for any tickets. And Game Time is now an authorized marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You got flash deals, zone deals, so you save even more when you choose a section. Let Game Time choose the seats. And, of course, all-in pricing. My favorite part, you don't have to worry. You know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Maybe my favorite draft class, and I think this is an era-changing draft and so important for the DC area and the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
I love what the Washington Commanders did in this draft, Matt. And obviously, the headlines are all going to be about the quarterback that they got number 2 overall, but I thought they got fantastic value and maneuvered the board and just did some phenomenal things. And maybe my favorite pick of all was their 3 selections in the second round, especially the first 2. Jerzon Johnny Newton in the second round. I think he's a menace all day. Clearly, he was the top player on their board because defensive tackle isn't necessarily their biggest need. They've already got 2 really good players inside there. Maybe they could dangle Jonathan Allen in trade or something like that. Or just bring Newton along slowly. But, you get a franchise quarterback, a dynamic passer, and Jaden Daniels in the first round, come back with a pass rusher like Jerzon Newton, who's the best interior pass rusher in this draft, in my opinion. And then you got just a pure dog of a nickel and Mike Sanders still out of Michigan. Corner in the second round went Ben Sinnott. You think Adam Peters sees a little George Kittle and Ben Sinnott in his game? Tight end out of Kansas State late in the second round. Brandon Coleman, starting caliber offensive lineman. Luke McCaffrey, speaking of the 49ers and some bloodlines in the McCaffrey pick there late in round 3. Guy that can get open on third downs, maybe give some special teams. And, so just Jordan McGee is a nice player as well, linebacker out of Temple in round 5. Phenomenal draft, I think, for the Washington Commanders and really setting the tone for a new era there.
They were on my list as well. I mean, I will concede when you have 6 picks in the top 3 rounds, it makes it a little easier, as well as number 2 overall.
Yeah.
Obviously more cards. That's one of my issues with these grades. Like if you give me a bunch of aces, I should win the poker hand. If I get a bunch of 2s and 3s, I'm not going to win, but so what? What did they do to help their team?
They can have the old regime a little bit too, for giving them a little jump start and having a few extra picks and a very high pick in round 1.
Newton, I thought, was a first-round player all day long, and I think the Jones fracture is the only reason he didn't go there, but I thought he was comparable to Murphy. You mentioned Coleman. I don't know if he'll be a guard or a tackle or what, or if he'll start opening day, but very worth the risk because he's a great athlete. And you talked about all these guys, but I did want to mention Jordan McGee out of Temple. I mean, they have this single-digit number thing at Temple that only a select few get, and he's that type of player for them. So some attitude guys and Sanistril and McGee, and let's change the culture around here.
Right, absolutely. So phenomenal by Adam Peters and the new regime there in Washington, and it's going to be really exciting to see how that comes about and comes together for them. Who's next up for you?
I went with the Lions. Sort of piggybacking off my Eagles pick. Corner for a playoff team. I keep coming back to that. Maybe they aren't Sauce Gardner or Jalen Ramsey, but you're getting 2 of the top 5, 6, 7, 8 corners in this draft for a playoff team at a huge area of need. I think that has immense value. I know he has some injury stuff, but Christian Mahogany is such a Lions type player too, just a pile mover. I really like Wingo in the 6th round as well as an upfield pass rushing interior player. Vakai is either going to be the best special teamer in the league or a quality player in your secondary. And then they took the dude out of British Columbia, who I, of course, had not heard, Manu, and with the hopes that he's going to be Jordan Mailata. And he doesn't have to be this year. He can hang out behind Decker and learn. And good O-line coach, great O-line environment. Maybe they get something out of him. A lot of
Sione Vaki, the Utah safety, is interesting because he was on a mission, only played 2 years, but he's got the athleticism, and then he played running back. The rare safety running back combo, could return kicks, so special teams early in his career, and he's got the goods athletically to be potentially starting, strong safety in the NFL as well. And I love the Mekhi Wingo pick, interior undersized edge rusher, to get him in the 6th round when some of these other undersized interior rushers were going in the 2nd and 3rd round. So phenomenal draft by the Lions. I'm with you.
I like it quite a bit. A lot different than like a Reader, and they add both those guys in interior.
This is another one where you have to hat tip an earlier season, but at least it was the same regime that put themselves in the position for the Chicago Bears to have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. And they absolutely made the right decision last year to stick with Justin Fields and trade out of that spot. And then to come back this year, that got them the number 1 pick in the draft. And you get a probably organizationally changing quarterback in Caleb Williams at number 1. And, you didn't have to do any maneuvering at that point. You just turn in the card, and it was, just don't screw it up basically at that point. But then to get Rome Odunze, and then coming back around, and look, they had a really small draft class, Terry Taylor and Austin Booker, right? And that was it. Five-man class. Austin Booker, by the way, in the 5th round.
I say Booker that late too.
He's got some traits as an edge rusher that could turn out real nice for them too. But took some swings in this class. Kieran Amagaji, 3rd round pick out of Yale, the offensive tackle. If he was able to play in the Senior Bowl and work out, he might have been a late 1st round pick. So this is a guy that a couple years down the road, oh my God, not only did they get their star quarterback, a number 1 wide receiver, they might have gotten a left tackle as well.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on the punter. Everyone says he's great. I know he has more punting yards of all punters in history. I mean, they had an awful offense, great defense in Iowa, whatever. Booker shouldn't have fallen that far. And Odunze almost shouldn't have fallen that far to 9. I mean, that's just a gift. That wasn't skilled to take Odunze, but it was fortunate for them. And their offensive tackles are fine. They took one in the 1st round last year, but if they can bring along the Yale dude for a season or play him at guard or whatever, or maybe he's just their swing guy in the 3rd round, there's a lot of talent there to work with. I like this one a lot.
Who's next up for you? Oh, one more note on the Washington class that I didn't mention. Looking at Kent Lee Platt, Math Bomb on Twitter, the RAS, the relative athletic score testing number. Washington had the best relative athletic score, average of 8.45 out of 10 for all of their. And it's basically lit up green like a Christmas tree. And actually, that's what
they're tied for the best.
Tied for the
with the Steelers,
the Eagles, right? 8
tied with the best with the Steelers, and your Niners are right behind them.
No. They're alone. They're alone. I got it wrong, by the way, with the
I just tweeted them out totally different than from
their worst RAS was 8.45. I'm looking at Kent Lee Platt's list right now. Pittsburgh was 3rd, Philly was 2, and Washington was 1, and with an average of 9.427. Excuse me, 8.45 was their lowest single player, and that was Sanders still the nickel corner, and that's with not counting Johnny Newton and Jaden Daniels because they didn't have full workout numbers, and they would have been really high too, I think, with theirs. So just tons of athletes on top of really good football players for Washington, and obviously the Philadelphia Eagles are 2 teams we've already mentioned. They were 2nd, and then just narrowly edging out Pittsburgh, who was 3rd.
Okay, so what I tweeted out was the first 7 picks in the draft. So they were tied for 1 and 2, and the Niners were right behind them at 3. So a little caveat there. I'm like, what did I do wrong? But that was what something Next Gen put out.
Gotcha.
We break in, or should I do another one here?
Let's see. Let's break.
Up even?
Okay, you're up next. Let's break here, and then you can. We can go out of order too. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right? There's still some really good classes out there that I want to dig into here. So let's get to those next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And look, I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about Monopoly Go, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers, cool playing pieces, emojis taunting your friends, and then you can smash their buildings and then heist their vaults and then, rub it in a little bit while you're at it. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenge. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers and everything you win or rent frenzies. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Check it out. Over 150 million people already have. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play and the App Store. It's game on with Monopoly Go. All right, next up for you, favorite draft class. Maybe we can rank them because we're kind of just like going back and forth. I think my one would be Washington, and but I've still got some really good ones. What's up next for you, Matt?
Yeah, and Cincinnati's mine right now. And there is some serious volatility to this one. Mims might be the best tackle in the league, or he might be hurt all the time and undeveloped player. Jermaine Burton, I think, is absolutely one of the best receivers in this class, but we know there are lots of off-the-field stuff. Eric All, I think, is one of the best tight ends in this class, but he never finishes a season healthy. So I do think swinging on those three offensive positions for the fences is risky, but I like the situation, especially with Mims not having to play right away with the two tackles they have, the two giants they have. And then, go ahead.
I just say it feels like a classic Bengals class,
right.
Like pre this regime Bengals class.
I was saying the same thing. Burton's not a real good boy, but we don't care. Right. And defense is kind of the opposite. They're just kind of solid get on base picks. I think Jenkins is a really good player. McKinley Jackson is a tough guy that's going to do the reader stuff for them. And Josh Newton is, I think, a guy that's going to stick in this league, so two different approaches on offense and defense, but I like what the Bengals did.
Matt, you tried to throw them in there a little bit earlier and oversell their athleticism in their class. But I got to give it to you. On my list is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know, we've talked so much about the Steelers and what they should do in the draft. And it's like, man, if you could get Fuaga or say Troy Fautanu in the first round, and man, maybe even if you could swing a center in the second round, like Zach Frazier, that'd be a phenomenal draft. And if you can't get Frazier, maybe even a little bit later in the draft, you get Mason McCormick, who could be a guard center, super athletic out of South Dakota State. And they did all three of those things, Matt. And then on top of it, they got a guy who doesn't have an ACL in his leg, or else he would have been the top linebacker in the class in Peyton Wilson. You get him out of North Carolina State in the third round, and then Roman Wilson, a tough wide receiver out of Michigan, in round 3 as well. So, a phenomenal class for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know you didn't want to bring them up, but I had to throw them out there because it's absolutely a great class and worthy of bringing up here in this episode.
100%. If you told me 2 weeks ago the draft will start with Fautanu and Frazier, I'm like, I'm in. Cool, great, perfect starting point. Firm up that O-line. I talked centers to death, and there was the three at the top: Powers, Johnson, Barton, and Frazier. But to me, if the Steelers had missed out on a center, McCormick was my number 4 as a developmental athletic center guard. So they ended up with him too. I guess they agreed with me because I did not see a third offensive lineman coming off the board that early, and I think they liked him quite a bit. One theme especially with those top 5, so the top 5 picks, they've played a ton of snaps. And I think a lot of them are going to be in the action early. And Peyton Wilson's a perfect example. Like, you may not get a second contract out of the guy, but he's probably a starter now. He was like the best offensive player in the country last year.
You might have got 5 starters. I don't know how long it would take for Mason McCormick, but 3 offensive line starters. That's a really quick way to revamp your offensive line there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and they're going to run the ball a ton with Arthur Smith and try to take some stuff off the quarterback's plates, and so it all adds up. They still have some needs. Their receiver situation's not great, but they're physical and they're high character guys. And even like Roman Wilson will block his butt off, even though he's not big. That's kind of the Steeler type players.
And then even in the 6th round, safety out of Texas, Ryan Watts, it's like, it's close enough to Watt. Let's just draft him too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, those guys always work out around here. He's the super athletic guy I never heard of when they took him. Yeah.
What's next for you, Matt?
I'm going with Arizona.
Okay.
And obviously some of this is just volume as well, but they set themselves up for this knowing they need as many players as possible, but not just to stay at the top. But I thought rounds 4 and 5, I thought were great for them. I thought Taylor Demerson, Xavier Thomas, Christian Jones were all basically day 2 picks, and they got them scattered throughout day 3. Tip Ryman to me is a really interesting player. Teams are just taking athletic tight end prospects and swinging for the fences. You know what I mean? Benson's a faster version of James Conner. Melton's one of my favorite players in this draft. We talked about the first rounders, Harrison and Robinson. It's just a lot of stuff. You know, Isaiah Adams is probably a starting guard.
12 picks, if I did my math correctly, for the Arizona Cardinals in this class. And they had like 7 in the first 3 rounds. And so,
yeah.
I mean, and these guys are all going to play. This roster needs a lot of help. Elijah Jones, I like that selection. Underrated guy, just sneaking in the top 100 picks there. Boston College cornerback, has some length and some athleticism. Tip Ryman's kind of just a moldable player. We went back-to-back Illinois guys, by the way, in the 3rd round with Isaiah Adams and Tip Ryman. Super athletic running back and Trey Benson. Some people thought he's the best running back in the class. I'm with you with Max Melton. Loved him. Darius Robinson is going to set the edge against the run at the very minimum. Is going to give some pass rush as well. Can move him around. And of course, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr., if he's the guy that everyone thinks he is, then, you know, they might have some company on their wall of fame next to Larry Fitzgerald someday with Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, right.
So this is a really important draft. A ton of players, and I think a lot of them are going to play big roles for that team in the short and distant future.
I 100% agree. I think they got a lot of stuff, and if even half of those guys hit, it goes a long way to making a really respectable starting 22.
Do we want to go any negative with this, or do we want to save that for another day?
If there's something that stands out to you, go for it.
You know, let's wait. Let's keep it a positive here, because there's still some more that I liked that maybe might not be as high, or like, oh man, this is the best draft class. But I did like what the Miami Dolphins did. Chop Robinson, I think, was worthy of the pick, and I was glad to see a team take a shot on him, even a team that didn't really necessarily need the position that much, just because, you know, he's a dynamic player. And what I saw on tape was a guy who's definitely going to get stats in the NFL, even though he did it in college. And just, I think a lot of it, and we see that I saw a lot of stats from, like, on a negative way for defensive linemen in this class, and in a positive way for offensive linemen in this class. Like, oh, didn't give up a sack in 2 years. Well, it's like, you just ran RPOs all the time. There was no real pass set. How are you going to give up a sack in 1.5 seconds? I hope he didn't give up any sacks, right? And it's kind of the opposite with Chop Robinson. Like, he was a disruptor. He was a difference maker. And when you start allowing him to pass rush with true pass sets and 5-step drops, he's going to find some quarterbacks. And so that's what and by the way, Patrick Paul in the 2nd round's a player I liked. I felt like I was a little higher on him than others, and they nabbed him at pick 55 out of Houston, 6'7", huge guy. And then Jalen Wright was one of my favorite running backs in this class. I compared him to Raheem Mostert, and guess what? He goes to Raheem Mostert's team in the Dolphins. And like, if you're taking a fantasy football flyer, Jalen Wright, Tennessee running back, 4th round pick, Miami Dolphins, 4.3 speed. I mean, there you go. And Malik Washington's a phenomenal value as well in the 6th round. Mohamed Kamara, another even more undersized defensive end pass rusher. So they're just trying to get speed on this team and speed off the edge. They don't care about the size of their pass rushers in this draft, apparently.
Yeah, I found it funny almost. I mean, I almost broke out laughing when they took Wright. Like, of course they take the speedster running back, and the Niners also get Garendo. You know, like, the 2 fastest guys in the draft are basically the same scheme. It's like, okay, this is what happens all the time. But I'm glad you brought them up, because 2 of my absolute favorite picks, if this was Brian and Matt's favorite 20 picks, Kamara in the 5th round and Malik Washington in the 6th round definitely would have made my list. I mean, I like those players a lot. I understand that neither one's a prototypical size. I just think they're good at football, to be very honest with you. And I think Taj Washington, too, is another undersized slot that's kind of interesting, that maybe they want a little bit more diverse wide receiver core than just Hill and Waddle, you know?
Yeah, they need some compliments there for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I got
I'm out.
One more, or you want to? Okay.
Yeah, however many you got. You can keep it going.
I got one.
Okay.
I'm a huge Drake May fan, so I'm going to give New England credit for that. We talked about that already. I'm also a big believer in Jalen Polk. I don't think he'll ever be one of the best receivers in the league, but I can't imagine him busting. And just a solid number 2 for what they have there, to me, is really interesting or valuable. And then you get 2 offensive linemen. Neither one's super flashy, but if either hits, great. I'm a big Javon Baker fan. That to me is why I brought this up. And Jaheim Bell's a pretty good receiving tight end, so I liked what the Patriots did. I've not been fond of what they've been doing team building for quite a while, but I wanted to give them some credit.
Yeah, I don't know why Jaheim Bell fell all the way to the 7th round. I mean, maybe he's not a fit for everybody, but he's got, a little H-backiness. He's got run after the catch ability. Obviously, for the Patriots, it's all about Drake May. If he hits, it's a great class. If he doesn't, okay. To be honest with you, I like Polk and I like Baker, but this was like the team that needed that style of receiver the least.
Good point.
You know what I mean? Like they needed something different than like medium-sized, medium-speed guys.
Yeah. Good jack of all trades, master of none types, right?
But I mean, Javon Baker in the 4th round, by the way. And he sounds mad about it. Like there's going to be a chip on his shoulder. I actually like the Baker pick, probably where they got him more than the Polk pick.
Mm-hmm. And I bet like maybe you trade for T. Higgins now, or go get your 1. It looks like you have your 2. Next year's 3rd overall pick will be the best receiver of the draft, or and then get May his number 1, or trade for Ayuk, or whatever. I mean, go now. Job number 1 is find a number 1 receiver.
That is our favorite draft classes from the 2024 NFL draft. Let us know what your favorites are at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. Matt and I back tomorrow. Maybe some classes we weren't too sure about, some head scratchers, and continuing to break down this 2024 NFL draft. Catch you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.